Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the last session of this mini-series of religion and pop culture at WebYeshiva. I'll mention now, and I hope to mention at the end, that starting next week we will have 4 more sessions with officially a different title. That will be called Midot in Pop Culture. That will be at the same time and slightly different focus, but more or less the same kind of stuff that we've been doing. What we're doing today is a little bit different because we're going to be focusing on music, and therefore less what we usually do, which is comparing the content and discussing ideas. So there will be that as well, but most of what we're doing in this session is listening to music. On the topic of music and learning contemporary music and learning Torah lessons from it, I do recommend the supplementary article that I uploaded called "Chocolate Covered Pills" by Hannah Wisnitzer, now known as Olivia Friedman. She wrote it as a student, and she's now a teacher at Ida Crown Jewish Academy in Chicago. But what we're going to be doing in this session is focusing on the quotes and ideas from Kohelet, what they translate as the Book of Ecclesiastes, how that appears, examples of how that appears, compare and contrast between Kohelet and songs that refer to it. There are a bunch of other songs that we're not going to be addressing that use expressions from Kohelet. I'll just mention a couple offhand that we won't be talking about. For example, there's a song by the band Coldplay, a song called "The World Turned Upside Down," that has a refrain, "and everything under the sun." So that's not an expression in contemporary English. That's an expression that's taken from the English translations of Kohelet. That's pretty much straightforward. Coldplay doesn't use it in the same way that it's used in Kohelet, but still. That's an example of like a phrase from Kohelet. Then there are some songs that take the idea from Kohelet and then basically reframe it in a contemporary song. We'll be doing some of those, but I'll just mention one that we're not going to be doing. The song "Bread on the Water" by the Imperials, that has a refrain: "Keep on casting your bread upon the water, soon it's going to come back home on every wave," which is more or less a direct quote from Kohelet Perek at the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph. But I felt like that was too too straightforward, too obvious. There are a bunch of songs that use depressing images. A bunch of the ideas we're going to be looking at are the depressing, or very, very heavy, morbid ideas from Kohelet. Some of them, some songs don't refer to Kohelet, but would seem to fit in with the general feeling. So, for example, "Candle in the Wind" by Elton John presents an image that could have been in Kohelet but isn't. The idea of that somebody's life is so tenuous that they're like a candle in the wind. But we're going to see the phrase "dust in the wind" is one that does appear, not in Kohelet, but in the Machzor. What we're going to start with is the most famous Kohelet song of all, the most famous quote from Kohelet, the one in source number 1. In fact, the phrase "there's a time for everything." The phrase you don't have to be religious to be into this phrase. In fact, if you're going to be quoting the Bible in public, then this is like one of the easiest things to quote. Whatever, there's so many different phrases here that it's very easy to just pick one or two that fit with what you're saying. In fact, I just looked up today Ecclesiastes and president or politician, and I found that both in America, both right-wing and left-wing Republicans and Democrats referred in the last few months, quoted "a time to heal" which is from Kohelet in Pasuk Gimel. And several months ago, the Speaker of the House in America, in quoting that, also referred to the line that doesn't get quoted a lot, a time to shun embracing. And she said, how about that? Meaning, like, we're living at a time in which people are supposed to have social distancing. Where do you see that in the Bible? Right here. That's not even like a medrash. That's just straight quote. Anyway, I want to briefly look at the psukim, and then we'll look at two different songs that refer to these psukim. Source number one. There's a time of everything has a time and a time and a season. For every desire, everything you want, under the sky. Apparently, even though laledet normally means to give birth, it's usually translated here, even according to the classic Mefarshim, as a time to give birth, a time to be born, a time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what's planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build or to build up. A time to cry and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, a time to dance. A time to throw stones, a time to gather stones. A time to hug. They translate a time to embrace, which I guess sounds better with the meter. A time to embrace and a time to shun embracing or to refrain from embracing. Almost finished with this. A time to seek or to ask. A time to lose. So I guess maybe a time to find, a time to lose. A time to keep something, a time to throw it away. A time to rip, a time to sow. A time for silence and a time for speaking. A time to love, a time to hate. A time of war, a time of peace. In fact, most of these words are pretty much the same in modern Hebrew. Actually, before we look at before we listen to a song, I want to share a few photos, which I meant to do at the beginning, but I got distracted by talking about other Kohelet songs. There's a great one of the quotes from Kohelet that we're not going to be addressing, but is really, really famous. I haven't heard a good song that quotes it. Is the one that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, etc. You see it quoted here in a 1946 essay by George Orwell. Yes, the same guy who wrote Animal Farm and 1984. He wrote an amazing essay called Politics in the English Language. It's about politics, but it's also about good writing. And he has such a great example of what's good writing, what's bad writing. What's good writing is this well-known verse from Ecclesiastes. And bad writing is, and then he paraphrases it in a few sentences, and it sounds like what we would call a line by legalese or bureaucraties. And then he goes through a few details. The first, meaning from Kohelet, translated into English, contains 49 words but only 60 syllables, and their everyday life. And the second version is 38 words of 90 syllables. Anyway, it's he says, and yet it's without doubt. Oh, right. Just one more line here. The second version, what he made up, contains not a single fresh, arresting phrase. In spite of its 90 syllables, it gives only a shortened version of the meaning contained in the first, and yet without a doubt, it's that kind of sentence, the long kind, that's gaining ground in modern English. So it's interesting that a different use of the of Kohelet, not for a song, but for like that's good writing. This is not exactly what we're talking about, but the quote about from the beginning of Kohelet, which we will see on page 2. Either vanity or vanities, or meaninglessness of Kohelet. Anyway, somebody a few years ago wrote out this quote using cut up pieces of ballots from Israeli elections. Each of these was originally a little slip of paper with an initial of a party on it, and somebody, I'll just make it a little bigger, somebody to represent, I guess, the compare and contrast between modern politics and the eternal wisdom of Kohelet. Put this together. Really, really well done. Since we're going to have here in Israel, we're going to have our 4th election in 2 years coming up, so it's always a good time to go back to this timeless wisdom. Let's briefly look at a few pictures that will relate that from the songs we're going to be looking at. Basically, I put together either a picture of the single and then the album, or a picture of the group. We're going to be looking at "Turn, Turn, Turn" by the Byrds. This is a picture from their the cover art of the single. This is the complete album that on which it appeared. This is from 1965, and just I don't know. For me, thinking about the group, the Byrds, for me, the trippy font in this version is more appropriate. Then next we'll be looking at "Dust in the Wind" by Kansas from 1978 is the single. This is the art from the single, and this is the art from the album called "Point of No Return." No, the word "no" written out, K-N-O-W. Then we'll be looking at the classic song "Time," listening to the classic song "Time" by Pink Floyd. This is a close-up of the 45. For the younger people, this would be a vinyl album that was meant to be played at 45 revolutions per minute. Anyway, the outside is the black part is the vinyl. Anyway, apparently they didn't bother getting cover art for that. But the album this was part of, "The Dark Side of the Moon," we'll talk about that briefly, is one of the most famous albums in history of rock. Billy Joel, assuming we have time, we'll listen to a song, one of the lesser-known songs from his famous 1973 album Piano Man. One of his later collections, more recently, he's aged a bit between 73 and 2019. On one of his greatest hits albums, where there are 20 songs, the song that we're going to look at, assuming there's time, is not on that list. It's not one of the greatest songs. We're probably going to end up skipping this, but there's a Christian group, alternative Christian rock group called Sixpence None the Richer. They have a song called "Meaningless," which is a direct adaptation of Kohelet. We probably won't be going through this, but I just thought it was interesting, and I included the words on the source sheet. There's a later collection of their greatest hits, and no, this song is not on the greatest hits. Simon and Garfunkel, back in the 60s. This is the single. You could see the imprint of the record inside the sleeve here from their 1966 album, "Sounds of Silence." And the last song that we'll be addressing is a much more recent one from 2002. It's called "Do You Realize" by the Flaming Lips. This is the art from the single, and this is the art from the album Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. Okay, and having said that, let's go to YouTube, and let's start with let's really continue with a video or two. Just a minute. So, Dveikus, this is the one Jewish group that we'll be listening to. They did an adaptation, the Orthodox Jewish group. This was, I think, from the 1980s. They did an adaptation of the last pasuk that we looked at in source number 1. But they didn't do the whole section, the 8 psukim, only the last one. Let's listen to part of this now, not the whole song. Okay, I'm going to pause that there and contrast that. There's nothing wrong with this song. It's just from the psukim, but I would have thought that that's as good as you're going to get with an adaptation of a pasuk. And yet, Pete Seeger managed to do the whole thing, the whole section into English, as sung by the Birds. Every single one, in order. To everything. Gonna skip a little bit. Okay. So, see that Mark asked when Pete Seeger adds the lyric, "A time for peace, I swear it's not too late." That's, except for the refrain, "Turn, turn, turn," which makes it, I don't know, makes it feel much more like a song, I guess, than a poem. This is the only thing that he adds. So the question is he putting his own spin on Kohelet's message? He writes, reminds me of Leonard Cohen, and who in her lonely slip, who by barbiturate. Right. In other words, Leonard Cohen's, his adaptation of Unatana Tokef removes it in a bunch of ways, removes it from the way we usually phrase it, the way we frame it in religious terms. And in that sense, I'm going to argue that it's an interesting question. I'm going to argue that Pete Seeger does not do that because even though he personally was a big left winger politically, but you know what? The fact that Kohelet ends on shalom is presumably like that's something that we want to emphasize. And in fact, Chazal, not so much on this pasuk, but on psukim in general that deal with shalom, they wrote an entire parak of Masechet Derech Eretz about how great peace is. Whether you want to limit it to interpersonal peace or whether you want to apply it to peace between Jews and our neighbors in the Middle East, that's another issue. But the importance of peace, that really should be an apolitical statement. So I swear it's not too late. If you want to apply it to politics, fine. But if you want to apply those same words to interpersonal relationships, that's also fine. And that's why I would argue that I don't know if it was necessary to add that at the end, but I would argue that it does not take away from the original. And if anything, because of this song, well, Pete Seeger wrote it, but the Byrds popularized it, and a very catchy tune, a very folk rock from the mid '60s. You could argue that these became among the most famous psukim of that people can actually quote, as opposed to, let's say, the Ten Commandments. Everybody's heard of the Ten Commandments, but how many people out there can actually list them? Well, that's hard, but it's not part of the song. So I would argue that this is a great, possibly among the greatest, most successful adaptations into a song of something that's from Tanakh. He didn't need to interpret it. He didn't need to rephrase it. It's more or less straight translation, but corrected for meter and a few minor adaptations. Most of the other songs, all the other songs we're going to look at, are more like more free adaptations. So moving on to source number 3. This is not actually Kohelet, but as we're going to see shortly, Kohelet speaks about Havel Havalim, which, according to one interpretation, anyways, it's just fleeting like a breath. So the phrase that appears here in Unatana Tokef, major piyut from the Rosh Hashanah Machzor, that speaks about how fragile we are, that our origin is from dust. What is a person compared to? A broken shard, withering grass, a fading flower, a passing shadow, a dissipating cloud, a blowing wind, flying dust, and a fleeting dream. So the phrases, the words, the wind, the dust, and the dream all appear in the following song, whether or not the members of the rock band Kansas in the mid 1970s, whether they were aware of Unatana Tokef, I'm going to guess not, but that's not the point. The point is that they use the same imagery. By the way, I just want to explain that all the videos we're looking at are not the official videos for the songs, but rather they are lyric videos that other people have put together in order to make it easier for you to read the words on the screen. Some of them have typos. I got the best versions that I was able to find. If you still find, and at least in some cases, that it's like white lyric, the words are in white on a light background, it's hard for you to read. So just, if you have the source sheet printed out, all of the lyrics here are on the source sheet. Anyway, so here we go with Dust in the Wind, which I think is one of the better poems. I think it works as poetry, not just musically.
Close my eyes, only for a moment, and the moment's gone.
going to skip a little. Okay. Wow, that is very powerful imagery. I just mentioned a couple of things about this song or this poem. There's this progression. I put it in bold here. First, all they are is dust in the wind. Just my dreams. My dreams are dust in the wind, but that's okay. Then suddenly there's all we are is dust in the wind, and then the singer kind of gives this cry or sigh in the middle, like he suddenly realizes how bad that it applies to us as well. And he ends with all we are is dust in the wind. Everything is dust in the wind. Over the course of the song, of the poem, you have the temporary contrasted with the permanent. The temporary, the moment, dreams, all we do, it slips away another minute. That's all the temporary, and then the permanent is the endless sea, the ground, the earth and sky. In other words, the earth, nature. It was here before us, it's going to be here after us, and then what are we in contrast? So picking up, so it includes the images from Unatana Tokef and adds a couple of others as well, and drop of water in an endless sea, and it throws in the editorial thing is that all your money won't another minute buy. You might think that you're so wealthy and you can buy anything, but you can't. You can't buy even another moment of time. Very powerful idea, and that last idea is, I suppose, technically not in Kohelet, but it fits very well with the approach to time that does appear in Kohelet, that right here in source number 5. This is from the beginning of Kohelet. I'm just going to read parts of it. Starting from Pasuk Dalet, one generation goes and another one comes. The Aretz Olam Omadet. The earth remains the same. That's like we just said in Dust in the Wind. And now we talk about other aspects of nature, the sun and the wind. Zarach HaShemesh Uba HaShemesh. The sun rises and sets, and it goes back to where it came from. Holech darom v'sovev el tzafon, south and north. That's the ruach. Sovev holech haruach. The wind keeps blowing around. All the streams go into the sea, but it's never full. And everything that's happened has already happened, and there's nothing new under the sun. Pink Floyd. One of the most famous rock bands. They go back to 1965. Very influential. Very influential in progressive rock, psychedelic rock. The album that this is from, The Dark Side of the Moon, is not only their most sell that many copies, but it's among the most critically acclaimed records in history. And in other words, not only did the people like it, but the critics also liked it. And there's a lot to talk about, but I just want to listen to part of the song "Time." It's pretty long. We're just going to listen to parts of it, but like the previous song, this really holds up as poetry. Starts the important part anyway. Starts with the alarm clocks. And the ticking of the clock. Okay, we're going to skip now. Here we go. Now. There's the sun. There's another stanza that I'm going to stop here. There's a lot going on here, but a bunch of references, not only references to literature, like "Hanging On in Quiet Desperation" is the English way, a reference to the line from Thoreau, "The massive men lead lives of quiet desperation," but that you run to catch up with the sun, but it's sinking, racing around to come up behind you again. I assume that they had in mind the idea from that we just saw from Kohelet. The sun goes around and around, and then they add to Kohelet, and the sun doesn't change, but you do. You keep getting older. It's harder for you to catch your breath. Rather, you keep racing against the sun, but the sun keeps winning. And they have this line beforehand: "You are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today." And that's a good segue to the next part that we're going to see from Kohelet. That here in source number 8, "Smach bachur b'yaldutecha." Kohelet says, "Okay, young person, enjoy yourself while you're young. Sure, have a good time. Do whatever you want, but V'da, you should know, ki al kol ele yiviacha ha'elokim b'mishpat. God will call you to account for all these things." But not but then a few psukim after that, if you're going to enjoy yourself, do it now. Bimei b'churotecha, when you're young, before the bad times come. And then Perik Yud Bet goes on an extensive mashal, an allegory of all the different parts of the body failing as one gets older. If you weren't depressed from the previous 11 prakim of Kohelet, that certainly is depressing enough. So, in the interest of time, I'm not going to play this, but the song Somewhere Along the Line by Billy Joel, I admit it's not one of his better songs, but he has this image in which he describes that you pay for your satisfaction somewhere along the line, and he ends with something that sounds a lot like what we just saw. It's good to be a young man and to live the way you please. Yes, a young man is the king of every kingdom that he sees. There's an old and feeble man not far behind. Oh, and it surely will catch up to him somewhere along the line. So that it's true. He removes the Hashem part. He removes the divine judgment. He describes it more in naturalistic terms. It will catch up to you. But that really fits in very well with what we just saw in source number 8. Moving on to page 3. We're not going to have time to go through the Gemara, but the very dramatic Gemara in source number 11, that the Chachamim were thinking about being Gonei's Sefer Kohelet, meaning to remove it from Tanakh and say, this can't be written with divine inspiration, with Ruach HaKodesh. It can't be because there are problematic things in it. And there's a lot to say about this, but just very briefly, the Maritz Chayot, a Talmud Chacham in the 1800s, he suggests that the difference between the books of Ketuvim and the books of the Apocrypha books are not Torah at all, but they were written around the same time as some of the later books. He argues that each book of Ketuvim has something in it where it's jarring. It doesn't fit with other Torah ideas. So he argues that Chazal must have read each one and said, okay, this has got to be out. It doesn't fit. We don't know this for sure, but the Gemara more or less says this about the book of Ben Sira. The book of Ben Sira is a book of Proverbs, has a lot in common with Mishlei, and yet the Gemara in Sanhedrin says it has at least one proverb in it that's just plain old stupid. So therefore, it can't be that. That's why it's one of Sfarim HaChitzonim. It's in the Apocrypha. It's actually a funny Gemara. That like why is Ben Sira out? Could it be because of this quote? No. Why you're not allowed to read it? Could it be because of this? No, that's okay. Could it be because of that? No, that's okay. Why are you not allowed to read it? And then Chazal keep quoting parts of it to show how you're not allowed to read it. Anyway, so Ben Sira is out, but Kohelet is in. So why? The Gemara in Shabbat, here in source number 11, says, really, they were thinking about getting rid of Sefer Kohelet, removing it from Tanakh, Mipnei Shedvarav Sotrim Zeh. It contradicts itself. Like, make up your mind. You know, should you enjoy life, or is life just stupid and there's no point? It seems to have a lot of contradictions. So why do they not, in fact, remove it? Why is it still in Tanakh? So the Gemara answers, because it starts with the words of Torah and ends with the words of Torah, and therefore all the problematic stuff in the middle can be reinterpreted to fit with a Torah point of view, and that's the rest of this Gemara. But I just wanted to mention what's the beginning is Torah and what's the end is Torah. The beginning is Torah is the idea that there's no point under the sun. Under the sun, that's the mundane life, but the Torah is above life. So that's a reference to the Torah. And the line at the end is the next to last line of Kohelet. In fact, let's look at it right here in source number 10. Sof davar hakol nishma. This equivalent of when all is said and done. Et Elokim yirav et mitzvotav shemor ki zeh kol adam. Fear God and do His mitzvot, because that's what it's all about. That's what being a human being is all about. So the idea is that since he says that's the bottom line, fear God, so it must be that all the things earlier that seem to contradict fearing God, those have to be reinterpreted.
What's Pasuk Yudalid then? How do they interpret that? The next Pasuk.
Oh, so that, one second, it isn't, the Gemara does not actually address it. I guess I'd have to check in Kohelet Rabbah to see how Chazal interpret it. It's a little unclear both from a Torah perspective and in general. I would have to check, but offhand I would say that they speak about bringing God brings everyone into judgment. That it doesn't have to mean that, but given that the previous pasuk is referring to your fear of God, that's presumably the way that they would want to interpret it. It seems to me.
In effect, basically, in the end, you need to fear God because He's going to drag you to judgment whether you're good or bad.
Key doesn't have to be because. It could mean that. It doesn't have to be that. It could be that. I'm not sure. I would want to look it up. It's a good point. One of the other. Thank you, Yoni. One of the other.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I just think it's interesting because I don't know what everybody's minhag is, but our minhag in our shul is that we repeat that second to last line at the very end.
Right, and that is a pretty standard custom of 4 different times through the year, either the end of certain of Kohelet and Eicha and two haftorahs that end on negative notes. The idea is that we don't want everybody to leave all depressed, so we're going to repeat the next to last pasuk, which is not as down, not as much a downer as that. That's, I think, the usual interpretation. It's in some of the standard Mefarshim do say that. But yes, so it's funny that probably a lot of people, whether because of the phrase "Sof davar hakol nishma," or whether just being in shul and hearing that at the end, they think that's the last pasuk in Kohelet. No, it's practically the last pasuk, but it's not exactly. So the song we're going to skip is the one by Sixpence None the Richer I mentioned before, a Christian group. They have a song called Meaningless. They interpret Havel Havalim is meaningless, it's all meaningless, but I thought it was interesting that in the middle of the song they say, fear your God, this is all I know, which is only a religious group is going to do that. In general, Kohelet songs don't bring that up because people are leaving that out. But I just wanted to point out, I recommend going through a long essay that this is just excerpted from that we're going to skip now, source number 13, an interpretation that Havel Havalim should not be interpreted as meaningless, but rather fleeting. Because meaningless or vanity, whatever, has a very negative connotation. But if you say that, well, we don't have that much time left here, I'm just going to read the end of this selection from source number 13. Ethan Dorshav, who is actually an artist, he says, if you read it, one second, right, the standard translation, I saw the wicked buried who had come and gone from the place of holiness, they were forgotten. This is vanity, according to this standard translation. But Eitan Dorshav points out this is difficult. Why is it considered vanity if evildoers are forgotten? The verse makes far more sense if we understand it to refer to the illusory, temporary nature of evil's success. That the wicked are buried and they are forgotten because what the wicked do is fleeting. What the good do is fleeting, and what the bad do is fleeting. So it's through the corrected reading of Hevel as transients, like it's only temporary, that we can understand the structure of the book of Kohelet, and then he goes through and tries to read kind of reread the entire book in this light. I'd like to go over a song from a different classic group. One second. Right. From Simon and Garfunkel. This is not included in all of their greatest hits, but it's certainly, considering that they were young. Paul Simon was young when he wrote this. It's pretty impressive how he was able to capture the mood so well of Kohelet. But this is going to tie in with the fleeting. Everything is temporary, so take that into consideration. This is one of their songs with happy tune, depressing lyrics.
I was 21 years when I wrote this song. I'm 22 now, but I won't be for long. Time
Here's the wind.
And they crumble in your hand. Once my heart was filled with the love of a girl. I held her close, but she faded in the night, like a poem I meant to write. And the leaves that are green turn to brown, and they wither with the wind, and they crumble in your hand. I threw a pebble in a brook and watched the ripples run away, and they never made a sound, and the leaves that are green turn to brown, and they wither with the wind, and they crumble in your hand. Hello, 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 hello. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. That's all there is, and the leaves that are green turn to brown.
The end. Wow. In some ways, it would be, you can compare and contrast Leaves That Are Green with Time, that we listened to part of before from Pink Floyd, because both songs mention the idea of writing, meaning to write something. Pink Floyd said, plans that either come to naught or half a page of scribbled lines. Thought I'd something more to say. And here's Simon and Garfunkel write, like a poem I meant to write, like the feeling of like the lost possibilities. Simon and Garfunkel they don't need my haskama. They don't need my saying that they're impressive. But one of the things that's impressive about them is this contrast between peppy tune for mid-'60s folk rock, and then really dark, depressing lyrics. And we could probably mention half a dozen other songs of theirs that do this. But I thought it was interesting. Why do we do this song now? Because this song especially talks about fleeting. Hello, 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 goodbye, 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 goodbye. That's all there is. So it says, in retrospect, time has gone by super fast, as opposed to in the Pink Floyd song Time, where you have the alarm clocks and the ticking, and this is like a nice happy tune, and now song's over. Okay. So one of the messages of Kohelet, we said before, it has a bunch of contradictory messages, but one of the messages is, and this fits with, you could say, if you read Hevel as vanity and meaningless, then the appreciate the time you have with your loved one seems like, well, that's kind of going in the opposite direction. That's right here in source number 15 from Perek Tet. Re'ei chayim im isha asher ahavta kol yemei chayei hevlecha asher natan lecha tachat hashemesh kol yemei hevlecha. So enjoy happiness with the woman you love all the fleeting days of your life that have been granted to you. And that's that's your portion. That's what you've got. So it sounds like a contradiction, but going back to what Eitan Doroshav wrote, going back to, one second, bottom right of page 4, he quotes this line, and he says, perhaps the most striking example of how vanity doesn't work is this pasuk. All the days of your transitory life, that's the way he's translating it, which God has gifted you under the sun. If you read it the traditional way, vanity, meaningless, the verse is difficult. So, like, live joyfully all the days of your vain life, all the days of your, be happy all the days of your stupid, meaningless life. That sounds like a contradiction. So if the verse makes far better sense, he suggests, if heaven was translated as fleeting. Cherish your time together, for life is fleeting and therefore precious. So for me, anyway, that interpretation of Eitan Dorshav kind of explains a lot about Kohelet, including this particular pasuk. And this brings us to the last song, and that is from the song "Do You Realize?" I want to talk briefly about the Flaming Lips, because at least some people here are my age or older than I am, and this might seem like a new group. Actually, the Flaming Lips have been a rock band since 1983. They're in the genre called neo-psychedelia. This particular album, Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, is also called space rock or dream pop. It's very, or experimental rock. It's very creative. It's very creative, but experimental rock or psychedelic rock, you don't necessarily expect to be that memorable. This particular song is memorable, and not just that. There's a website that ranks all 17 of the Flaming Lips albums, and it says that Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots would be number 2. This is what the website says. It's a big record about feeling small, and it culminates with "Do You Realize?" Perhaps the sweetest, simplest, most nakedly honest song ever written about what it is to be an earthling. There's beauty in struggle and sadness and in being small, unquote. That's from the website diffuser.fm. Before we play the song, I just want to point out that it's not just that whoever wrote that website noticed. It's not just that I noticed. The Flaming Lips, they do concerts all the time, and they end every concert with this song. This song means a lot to a lot of people. It's, in some ways, it's very depressing, but it's also very uplifting, and like it works. And I also like the instruments. But let's listen to it now, and that will be the conclusion. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. Do you realize that you have the most beautiful
think you could see what's so impressive about that. Both the powerful the music and the combination, we're floating in space, but life goes fast. So everyone you know someday will die. Let them know you realize that life goes fast, and then you say to them, "Do you realize that you have the most beautiful face?" So it's a variation. It doesn't quote Kohelet exactly, but it certainly does seem to fit with the interpretation that we just gave. That because life is temporary, therefore make the most of your relationships. And anyway, I thought it's up there. It's not obviously a Kohelet song the way that the first two. The first one, the turn. It's not quoting Kohelet exactly, but it certainly fits with this particular sentiment. And I want to ask as a question, and then we'll wrap it up, and then I'll look through the comments. Does anybody want to suggest why they say what's so significant? You realize the sun doesn't go down; it's just an illusion caused by the world spinning around. And therefore, what? What are they? How does this fit with what they're trying to say? Does anybody want to offer a suggestion? I mean, I can give a suggestion, but go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because when you're looking at the sun going down, in that sense, you think that you're the center of the universe, but no, you're not really. It's not really about you, and you're not the center of the universe, and it's just going to keep going and going without you.
So, in which case, this is a kind of a variation on what Kohelet said back in source number 5, that the sun rises and the sun sets. Technically, the Flaming Lips are saying the opposite of Kohelet, because they're saying the sun doesn't rise and set, but the idea is that it's you compared to the sun. There's no comparison. I want to agree with that and add that it's an illusion. What is the sun really? The sun is always there. We perceive it as it sets and it rises and sets because of the way that things are set up on this planet. But really, the sun is always there, for better and for worse. And it's kind of a reminder that so much of our perceptions are an illusion. That's just the way it appears to us. It seems to me that the world revolves around me because that's the way that Hashem made me. I'm in the center. Rav Shimon Shkup has Hashem doesn't expect us to actually care about other people as much as we care about ourselves, because Hashem didn't make us that way. Hashem made us in a way that we are literally the center of our universe. Instead, he says, how do you fulfill love your neighbor as yourself? You can't just say, well, God said so. You have to expand I'm summarizing a long thing here, but it's the Hakdama to the Sharei Yosher. Rav Shimon Shkup says you have to expand your ego boundaries. Instead of just I only care about myself. There's I, and then there's instead of just my body, there's me and my soul. I need to care about my soul also. I need to care not only about myself, but also about the me. The I, my ego, it should include my family also. And then it should include my community also. It should include my people also. And the idea is that it's not going to work if you say, I need to also care about them. That's really, really too hard. You just have to convince yourself that it's not them, it's us. So that would be an example of something where you need to get beyond, you need to work within the illusion. So I thought that possibly could fit with this. Our time is up. I'm going to end the recording shortly, and then I'll go through the comments. Just want to invite everybody to join me for the next 4 weeks as well on topics of midot and pop culture. Topics are instant gratification and impatience, confronting fear, loneliness in pop culture, and the appeal of immortality. Anyway, I'm going to end the recording. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you got something out of this. 1 second. Okay.